Hello, welcome to the Saroy channel. I'm so delighted you've joined me this evening, and I've got a fabulous story for you. I don't know if any of you know about salmon runs, but this is a story just about that, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let's get started. But before we do, definitely make sure you subscribe to my channel, because I have got so many exciting stories for you to listen to, and you're not going to want to miss out. I know I wouldn't. Nothing beats a good story. So let's get started. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my father has been deceased for over 20 years now, but he told me a story once that completely blew my mind. I have to tell you, I do not have any details, such as date, years, or exact locations where this Bigfoot encounter happened, but I know this story really does need to be told, because believe me, it is quite some story. My only wish is that I can tell this story half as well as my father did. One day when I was about 18 years old, my father and I were sitting around the campfire at a camping location somewhere in Oregon, and we were all telling amazing ghost stories to entertain each other while we roasted marshmallows over the open flames of the fire. I remember my father was very quiet. He had a look of deep contemplation on his face, which I found out later was because he was wondering if he should tell his story at all. I have a true story to tell you, he told us. It really happened to me many years ago when I was a young man. It's a ghost story, I asked Tim excitedly. Did you see a ghost or something? Oh, please do tell us, Dad. No, not a ghost story, said my father, stroking his beard. Something more on the unusual side, he said. You could say it was a weird but very true experience. Go on, urged my mother. Have you ever told me? She asked him. No, never, said my father gravely. No, I've never told anyone, because the story is so weird, it's almost unbelievable. Go on, Dad, we encouraged. Please tell us your story. We were excited to hear what he was going to tell us. Well, when I was a young boy, living in Alaska, he said, I had a very big hobby. Every year I would go and watch the salmon run. It was something that was so spectacular to me. I was always mesmerized by those grizzly bears, and I just loved watching them play in the water and eating the salmon. The problem with grizzlies, my father told us, they are very dangerous and formidable, with an incredible sense of smell, 17 times stronger than even a dog. The problem with their great sense of smell, my father continued, is that they can smell humans extremely easily, and they do not like us one bit. You see, at the best of times, they're elusive, secretive, and mysterious, and they are private animals, even avoiding other grizzly bears as much as possible. I wanted to watch the salmon run without being detected by those grizzly bears, he told us, so I hatched what I considered to be a spectacular plan. I decided not to bath for several weeks, without using any soaps or shampoos. And yes, I did smell disgusting, he laughed. I also ate a diet that was very bear-like. You could say I ate salmon for a whole month, I ate salad, honey and berries, and I drank pure spring water. I also covered my entire body every night with ash from the fireside, because they say that that will mop up any human-like odor. And I slept in a blanket that had been used on a young grizzly bear. And believe me, that blanket did smell of bear perfume, he laughed. I was hoping that all these strange techniques would help me mask my own human smell, so that I could sneak up on the salmon run without being detected. At least that was the plan. You see, he said, I really wanted to watch those bears and also sketch them, so that later I could paint some beautiful pictures of them. My father was a brilliant artist, and he had painted some pictures of bears over many years, which were phenomenal. Did it work? I asked him. Oh yes, said my father. I did manage to watch several salmon runs with those bears, and I was not detected. They were oblivious to my presence. Year after year, he told us that he had engaged in the same strict protocol of eliminating all human odor and eating only what bears ate, so that he could watch the bears on the salmon run. I would always find a remarkable hiding place, he said, and I would watch the bears. I would say that those experiences are among the most wonderful in my entire life. Watching those bears interact with each other was spectacular, entertaining, and utterly mesmerizing. One day, he said, I was watching the bears on the Salmon Run. There were two very large grizzly bears that were gorging themselves on salmon. One of the bears was particularly huge, and he was hugely dominant and made sure the other bears knew their place. If the other bear got a bigger salmon than he did, he would confiscate it from that other bear and eat it for himself. The truth was that there was just tons and tons of salmon to choose from. They were everywhere, so I don't even know why the big bear bothered so much. It truly was an all-you-can-eat buffet for bears, and they loved every moment of it. Anyway, while this was all going on, I suddenly noticed those two grizzly bears became extremely agitated. Something was clearly bothering them, and it was bothering them a lot. Their noses sniffed the air, and they seemed really concerned by what they were smelling. You could tell they were not happy, not one little bit. I wondered suddenly if they had got a whiff of me. Perhaps they had finally detected my human smell, which until now I had managed to mask superbly, even if I say so myself. I was concerned, even though I was armed, because I love grizzly bears. The thought of having to kill one of those animals in a confrontation of some kind really concerned me. However, I would have to protect myself if the worst did come to the worst. I knew that I was no match for a grizzly weighing half a ton. Suddenly the two grizzly bears, who'd been barely tolerating each other, literally took off together as quickly as possible, and they ran together side by side as if they were firm friends, which they most certainly were not. Their behavior was exceedingly odd, I thought. Bears do not have any predators, none that I knew of. What could it be that would scare them off so much that they would react in such a terrified way? It was odd, because the bears had certainly not had their fill of salmon yet, and yet something had rattled their cages, but what? I was puzzled. I must have remained hidden in my hiding place for at least 20 minutes. There were no bears in sight, and the two bears had bolted off a while ago, had not returned. It was all very, very strange to me, but I decided to continue watching and waiting to see what would happen. For me, nature was extremely exciting, and I wanted to see if I could get a whiff at what had scared such magnificent creatures off. It was not long before the most horrible odour wafted past my nose. Truly, the scent was utterly disgusting, but honestly, I do not know how to explain that smell, so I won't even try, although I will say it was a little like dirty mop, stale urine, and dead animal blended together into a nasty smell. It was then that I heard a strange, guttural, grunting noise, and then I saw this huge, monster-like creature. He was very big, like a bear, but he was not a bear. He was definitely bipedal, standing on two strong, muscular legs. He was covered all over with dark brown hair, much darker than a grizzly bear's. The hair looked thick and matted, as if he had overslept and woken up looking extremely bedraggled. Yes, my father said. That is a good word, he said. He truly looked bedraggled. He was not a pretty fellow. He had human-like essence to him, but he wasn't human. The closest animal that would resemble him, my father said, would be the ape. He had that ape-like look to him, you know what I mean. He had a huge dome-like head, virtually no neck to speak of, and the most massive shoulders that I have ever seen. His chest was about 4.5 feet across, and he must have weighed 900 pounds at the very least. He stood in the water and screamed the most horrible scream you have ever heard. It sounded like a woman was being murdered. That was the noise that was coming out of his throat, and it was terrifying. And it tormented me. I'm not quite sure how any animal in the woods would not have been affected by that noise. It was terrifying. The sound was so frightening that I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, and I just knew that I wanted to run as fast as I could. But the fear of seeing that animal made me stay grounded to my hiding spot. The creature did a strange thing. He stood in the water and screamed again, and then he thumped his chest in a very dominant way with his two fists. Then he proceeded to just devour the salmon, and he ate and ate almost as much as the bears would eat, and possibly even more. He then literally jumped over the bank area, which was over about 6 foot high, as if it was nothing, and disappeared into the woodline. "What do you think you saw?" I asked. "I have no clue," said my father. "I am still wondering, all these years later, what on earth that thing was. But I promise you it scared me to the depths of my being. If something could scare a grizzly off like that, then that really is saying something," he said. It was only more recently, after thinking about that, my father talking around the fire and describing the creature, that I realized all these years later that my father must have seen a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or the hairy man. In those days, no one knew what a Sasquatch was. Oh, I forgot to mention, my father did tell me that the creature, or the Bigfoot, weed all over the place after he'd eaten his fill of salmon and then went up the bank. On reflection, I think he was marking his territory with the grizzly and saying, "This is my salmon run and not yours." So there you have it. It looks like the grizzly may have had an enemy after all. Who would have thought it? Bigfoot himself. I hope your listeners enjoyed my story. Please only use my first name. Many thanks, Isabella. Until next time, good night and goodbye.